career stages. Oops, sorry, that recording, great. And so we have found a statistic today actually where it seems that only about 1 in 200 PhD students stay in academia. So there's seems to be kind of a lot of people kind of expanding outside and looking for other opportunities. As a PhD student myself, I'm often thinking, what's going to come next? So it's great to get some insight from people who have been in this position from a paleo background, kind of spreading their wings beyond academia. So great, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll have Emily and then Grace and then Stefanie introduce themselves and we'll get going. So thank you to everyone in our amazing panelists.
Thank you very much, Molly, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be able to join the webinar. I'm excited to see what questions you'll have to ask us later, but just a brief introduction of who I am and why I'm here. So my name is Emily, and as you can maybe hear, I have a bit of a mixed accent. I am half Italian, half American. I grew up in Italy, and I always had the thought or the dream that for academia I would end up going to the US. That did not happen ever until this point. So I did end up going to the UK, however. So I did my undergrad studies at the University of Bristol. It was a combined program where you do both the bachelor's and master's within 4 years. And you end up having an MSci certificate that was in geology. And it involved lots of field work and also a year abroad on exchange. So at that point, I had another chance to decide I'm going to go to the US, and I changed my mind yet again. I went to beautiful British Columbia, to UBC there in Vancouver, and I enjoyed a great year on exchange where I dived into a bit of oceanography and focused on that for the time that I spent there with new courses and also some field work. After that, I returned back to the University of Bristol, and I quite enjoyed my master's project. It was focused on ocean acidification and trying to see how corals in the deep Southern Ocean might change their mineralogy or not, depending on how ocean acidification developed. And since I really enjoyed doing the research there, I thought I wanted to continue with a postdoc. And at my time in Bristol, I met Derek Vance. He was a lecturer in the geology course. And at the time I was finishing my master's, he actually had moved to ETH in Zurich. So I called, or rather I wrote to Derek, and I checked in to see if he had any exciting projects going on, because the area of research he was doing was what really interested me. And it turned out he did. So a few months later, I ended up packing everything and moving to Zurich. And that's where I am right now during this call. And I've been here now for 10 years, a bit over 10 years. I'm really enjoying it. The PhD experience was also great. It was a lot of ups and downs, both in research and outside of that. The focus was on geochemistry, so I was looking at how different trace metals in the environment could maybe give us some insights into how oxygen evolved over time from the Archean up until modern times. And that was a lot of intensive lab work, lots of interesting questions, lots of collaboration and conferences and many exciting opportunities there. And also at the same time, I think I was really lucky in terms of who else was around in the department at the same time, because there was a great social group, and we organized lots of extracurricular activities, a seminar series, a bit similar to this webinar today, and then a group that was focused on gender equality and fairness within the department that met regularly, a welcome committee for new students, a PhD retreat, and so on. And I got involved in a few of these extracurricular activities. I'm mentioning this because it will be important later, because when I finished my PhD, I was still really excited about the research, but I felt I didn't want to keep moving from one place to the next. That prospect wasn't super exciting for me. I really liked the place that I had found in Zurich. but I wanted to still put the skills that I had at use and somehow stay connected to research. And I spent some time searching to see if there was an opportunity to do this. And I discovered a part of the, let's say, private sector or industry that I had no clue existed. And that's where I joined Accelopment, the company where I'm based at now. And what Accelopment does is consulting companies and academics, so researchers in these two different sectors mostly, providing support on how to identify funding opportunities for the research that they want to push forward, and then supporting them in preparing proposals to apply for funding from the European Commission mostly. And once these proposals are accepted and turn into projects, we then support with project management and also lots of outreach and communication activities. So that allowed me to really put together all of these different skills that I had gathered by organizing these extracurricular activities, but also lots of the skills that I learned by doing my research. And recently, so since October last year, I also changed my role a bit within the company. So if before I was working on proposal writing, project management, outreach, and training in transferable skills, now I'm only focusing on the latter part. So I provide training to PhDs and postdocs in different research projects on how to do research project management, science communication, data management, how to consider gender aspects in their research, how to write proposals, and how to consider funding opportunities. And I hope that was within the 5 minutes. That's a bit of a quick snippet of where I come from and where I am now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. Great. I can't hear you. Let's
How
see.
about that?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
I've got a
Perfect.
button here. I've got a button on the screen. Who knows? It's been how many years since we started using Zoom? Yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to come and chat about my outside of academic career, job, trajectory. Who knows? And my background started with geography as my undergrad. I'm a huge nerd for rivers and environmental stuff, pretty much anything interests me in that regard. And then through my academic training, I went on and did really focused into river studies, particularly geomorphology, and then how these systems evolve over long timescales. And that's where my paleo environmental string to my bow comes in. And that was really honed over my master's degree. I did the quaternary science master's down at Royal Holloway, and unlocked all of the secrets of the past just by looking at dirt and gravel and sediment exposures and all that. So then for my PhD, I managed to mash my fluvial geomorphology and my quaternary science together. And my PhD looked at long-term evolution of a huge river down in Argentina, the Rio Chubut. And I absolutely loved that project. Similarly, my PhD was filled with ups and downs. And I finished it pretty exhausted. And I knew it was going to happen. So I'd been saving, and I actually moved into a van and took like 4 months off where I just did nothing. And then I then just kind of didn't really have much direction after whether I would stay in academia, whether I would go into policy or industry, or just not do rivers at all anymore. I really felt kind of lost. But in the end, I ended up in a policy position up in Scotland, and that was just a one-year job as a senior hydromorphologist for the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. And that role was all based around acting on behalf of the regulator and the policymaker for Scotland and the Scottish waterways, rivers and lochs. And that was a really interesting way of applying my science, and I really loved that job. It was really interesting. It was like a whole new can of worms that was opened. My eyes were open to the world of policy doing that, and there were some really good opportunities that came out of it. And after that contract ended, again, still like I'm still working all this out. I don't really know where I'll end up, but then I ended up in this consultancy job that I'm in now. I work for cbec. I'm a senior consultant, and I'm a geomorphologist, a fluvial geomorphologist still. So I'm still practicing my science, and this job is great. It's way more hands-on than what it was in my policy job. Policy for me was a lot more kind of high-level, like approach, whereas this is work on the ground, actively restoring river systems. And the type of work I do is process-based and nature-based solutions to engineering and river restoration, and still that's all based around in the river wetland sort of sphere. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grace. So we're going to start with Stefanie in just 1 second. So we're having a little issue with the Zoom. So in a second here, we'll put another link into the chat. So just in case the session closes, that will be the link that we're using. So apologies for that. Again, technology, we all use it, but somehow something seemed to slip. So just be aware of that. So Stefanie, we'll go ahead and introduce. Oh, sorry, Paul.
Can we pause for a second? Molly, do you want to make a link that, because maybe yours will last longer, or I can make a new link? Yeah, I'm really sorry about this, but the Pages Zoom subscription apparently changed, and that gave us a meeting limit. So this is something that was a complete surprise. Okay, so Molly, you'll make the link. That's fine.
I'll do it right now. Yeah.
Let's continue with Stefanie. So keep an eye out in the chat, folks.
Good. Yes. So I see the timer 5 minutes, 35 seconds. So I shouldn't be longer. That's for sure. So hi, everybody. Thanks also to the organizers for this invitation. And also thanks to the audience that you are here. And I'm curious about your questions later. So I'm Swiss. I did most of my career in Switzerland. And I started at ETH Zurich with my bachelor and master in earth sciences. And I did a major in geology and geochemistry. I got soon interested in surface processes, so quaternary geology, sedimentology, water, also groundwater. So I did, during my bachelor thesis with springs in the National Park of Switzerland, I did then master thesis on Lake Thun that is highly influenced by anthropogenic measures, so by a river deviation. And there I had a nice system that I could study. So this is another thing that very much interested me in earth sciences, this system thinking, and see how a system reacts when you change one parameter. I then continued with a PhD, also with lakes, so with limnogeology, because I liked so much the master thesis on Lake Thun. That was a paleoclimate PhD. So we did for the Alps a flood reconstruction for the Holocene. We used small lakes in the north and in the south, and used the lake sediments to reconstruct the flood frequency in the past. So what I really like there is actually to investigate lakes that nobody has investigated before. So this was really a bit this explorer feeling, so in the mountain as well. So I like the mountains. So I very much enjoyed this PhD. We had also a good team. So PhD was a good experience. And then came the question, so what do I do now? I didn't really plan a research career, but after the PhD, I felt like, well, I should maybe go abroad. I haven't done that until now. So I did a postdoc in California at the Caltech, so at the California Institute of Technology, working on the leaf wax hydrogen isotope proxy, using my lake sediments from Switzerland. But I was actually motivated to learn more about isotopes and new methods also in the lab. And well, then came the point, so what do I do now? Do I go back to Switzerland, or do I stay in US? And an opportunity showed up at the University of Neuchâtel in Switzerland at the Center for Hydrogeology and Geothermics. So I could start there as a senior researcher, senior lecturer as well. So I started then also doing quite some teaching. And I could actually extend my knowledge also in the field of hydrogeology. I could then also link my knowledge about the lakes with hydrogeology. So I looked at groundwater inflow in lakes. So that was a great topic for me then in Neuchâtel to that I could use both of my expertises, the lake expertise, but also the water expertise. And yeah, I was 6 years senior researcher there. And I think we will come back later to the decision to leave this academic path. So I could find then a job in private industry in an engineering geology office, where I worked on engineering geology and natural hazards. It's a lot about slides. And that was good experience, but I still felt I would like to have a bit more groundwater. So I applied a good year ago for this position at the Federal Office for the Environment of Switzerland in the groundwater group. So we are doing the monitoring of the groundwater, so the scientific basis actually. And so I still have the opportunity to collaborate with research. So we also hire researchers to do projects for us. We have the data, all the data at our disposal of the monitoring stations. So it's relatively close to research. I'm not doing research myself, but I can still use my network and also collaborate with the researchers. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Perfect timing as well, because this meeting is about to end. So everybody here should look into the chat window and find the link that Molly posted and click that link or copy that link into your browser. And we're going to restart this. This whole thing on another Zoom. So go ahead and do that now, everybody.
Finish up the work I was already doing during my PhD, but it was how many months? 4 months or so. And then I had a period of unemployment time here in Zurich while I was trying to see what would be the next step. And at that time, I remember I went to there's a very nice market here that happens every week. And I would go there from time to time, and I saw there was a gardener stand that was looking for some help. And I really like gardening in my spare time. So I applied. And so I worked as a flower lady for a couple of months in the downtown Zurich. It was really fun. I got to practice some Swiss German, and then after that I joined Accelopment, and I still managed to go to the market, but more to say hi and to buy rather than to sell and be a flower lady. But it was really fun. It was nice to detach from post PhD and do something totally different, outdoors, talk to people. It was nice.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel even now I'm kind of in the last year of the PhD, and I can feel the tiredness. So I feel that I think it's nice to hear that it's like, it's okay to take, a little bit of a break. That's not,
Definitely. The holiday is also very highly recommended. I did that as well.
Nice. Great. Okay, so we have more coming back in. Thank you for everyone again who just came in new. Thank you for being flexible with us here. I'm just gonna spotlight Stefanie again. Thank you.
But that's okay. We'll proceed anyway. Very sorry about the inconveniences. So now, we would like to ask the panelists some questions. And the first one is, what motivated your decision to leave academia and transition into your job in the private sector or public sector? Probably already touched on it, but we're also curious whether it was more of a feeling of being pushed away from academia because of things that you did not like, or if it was more that you were drawn to the opportunities that you found outside of academia. So let's start with Emily for this question.
Yeah, sure. So from my side, I think I mentioned this a bit earlier, but it was a combination of factors. I felt at the end of my PhD, and actually when you weren't here yet, Molly was asking me if I had a bit of postdoc time. So yes, I did. I had a few months of postdoc afterwards. That was to finish off some of the work from my PhD. And at that point, I felt I wanted to try and explore what other possibilities were out there. I wasn't super excited by the most common need that we have to, keep moving around from one postdoc to the next. I had done some moving around before, really enjoyed it, but at that point in my life, I just felt I wanted to stay put for a little while. On the other end, I wasn't as enthusiastic of some of the politics that were going on within academia, and I thought perhaps I can see if there are opportunities to keep doing research or still stay close to research, and still be involved somehow, but within a different sector. And since I started exploring that, I then realized, okay, with my PhD degree, actually, many jobs that require some of the lab work that I had been doing for the past 5 years didn't require a PhD. So I got confronted with the situation where I was applying for jobs and I got told, oh, no, sorry, you're just overqualified for this position. We can't hire you. And that was a bit of a disappointment, a bit of an unexpected outcome that I wasn't prepared for, because I felt previously I was within the bubble of academia and didn't really realize what the outside world was like. And yeah, I kept exploring a bit, and then I found that there were other opportunities where I could put the skills that I had gained at use and still stay close to research. And so it was a bit of a pull in that sense. I found nice opportunities that I could explore, and also the will to change and to try something different.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that the mobility aspect that you mentioned is super important. It can appear attractive, but I think it's also a reason why a lot of people end up leaving academia, is not wanting to have to move around so much. So now I'd like to pose the same question to Stefanie, which is, again, what was your motivation? And was it more of a feeling of being pushed away by academia, or more being drawn to the other opportunities outside?
Well, there was some, say, obvious pushing by the contract slowly ending. That was actually forcing me to get active. But at the end, it was also my choice to leave academia. So during my senior researcher time, I applied for professorships in Switzerland. I was also invited. Yeah, chances were not big to get a position, but were also not zero. But yeah, I felt limited nevertheless by the job options there are. So there are very few permanent positions in Switzerland, and I didn't feel like going abroad. And well, at the end, I really felt like there must be more out there than just in this bubble of academia. I mean, the world is big, and there must be more interesting jobs around than just at the university. And at the end, I actually actively withdraw an application for a professorship. I was invited. So some people were quite shocked. We're like, whoa, what are you doing? But I was quite sure that this is the right move for me. And also when I changed jobs, some people said, oh, that's really a pity that you're not in academia anymore. But yeah, for me, it's good. And I always said, well, there are other things in the world that you can do than working in academia.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point that we that's our experience as we go through our training, and that's the world that we see. And it does feel like a little bit of a bubble, but it's super valuable to open ourselves up to what else is out there. So Grace, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Maybe you didn't hear it because you were still filtering in, but the question was, what motivated your decision to leave academia and transition into your current job in industry? And was it more a feeling of trying to kind of move away from things that you didn't like about academia, or was it more that you were drawn to the opportunities you saw outside of academia?
It was honestly, I think it was like a pure whim. My that like big chunk of time that I took off, I really identified as like an academic, a researcher, a scientist, and the thought of leaving academia was like a bit of an identity crisis. Like, who am I outside of my PhD, and what do I do? Like, what's my use? And then after that big long break, I was like, oh, I like walking. I like being in nature and being outside. And then it just opened up a world of possibility. Like I can do, like, it's a job, and it was like, oh, I can do whatever. So, and then I kind of just fell into it. The reason why I left academia is because I suppose my supervisor sent me an email like, here's a potential job, and I thought, that's rivers. I need money because I ran out from all my traveling, and I just applied for it and got it, and it really just kind of happened. I didn't plan for it too much, and I still might go back, or try at least. I don't know if there's a ticking clock once you're out of academia, you can never get back in, but yeah, it was just sort of a bit of a leap. And it's working out.
Yeah, great. Okay. I think what you mentioned about kind of having to change your identity, that really, really resonates with me. It feels like a big change. So the next question that we wanted to ask was, how did you land your first position in industry, which you kind of just mentioned, Grace, so maybe we'll start with you. Like, what was that process like, and were there any challenges that you faced during that transition to get your first job outside of academia?
Sure. Yeah, it was an email that my job was landed, and like all of my jobs have been landed through my network. And I can't emphasize enough how important my network has been to me, and how much that served me through my like career progression. So it was an email, and it was just to the job description, and then the application process was a lot different to like academic positions, and that's the application process was more to do with experience and skills rather than like academic achievements. So there was a bit of refocusing there, and learning that side of selling yourself, and then challenges when I actually like got going and starting the role. It was a policy position. It, as I mentioned earlier, it like opened this can of worms of regulations and policies and position statements and like environmental law, and that whole side of my job was completely new. So I came with like a strong geomorphology base, which made up like 50% of my role, and then the other half was a whole learning experience. But I was really fortunate to be in a team of 6 people doing the same job, and the training I received and the knowledge I've gained as a result of it is so valuable.
Great, thanks. So yeah, I want to ask Emily as well, how was the transition process? Was it difficult to start to apply for non-academic jobs? And then was it also difficult in terms of having to learn new skills when you started a job outside of academia?
It was interesting. I started off, I think, with my very first application, sending out still a very academic focused CV and my list of publications. And then I realized, and I got told, well, that's maybe not the most important part. So I restructured my CV, and then a bit like Grace was saying, it's more about the skills and the experience and not really the academic achievements. I realized that, and yeah, it was then a very different process from anything I had gone through before. I also found the job that I'm currently in now at Accelopment through LinkedIn. I sent an email with the application documents, they requested. And then I was asked, so since the position was project manager communications, and the idea was to do mostly the outreach for these EU funded projects, I was asked to send in a portfolio of things that I had created, design elements, anything that could have been relevant. And that's where I was very grateful for all these additional activities I had done during my PhD, because I did organize some workshops, some seminar series, created some flyers, and so on. And I was also really thankful to one of my PhD supervisors, who first week told me, Emily, you should really learn maybe how to use Illustrator for your scientific figures. And that was great advice. It improved my figures throughout the whole PhD, but then it really came in handy even later. So if I can just put in a tip here, it's not part of the answer to your question, but if there is something that you can learn, something new, a new skill during your PhD, take the time to do that. It could be something related to how you present your data, or how you communicate, or how you manage your work. I'm pretty sure it'll be really helpful in the future at some point. Yeah, challenges. Yeah, it was just a very different process. And so I tried my best. And I think one thing we're really good at as researchers is we're quite resourceful. We can find our ways, tackle the problem. And I think that came in quite handy. I also had a trial day where I had to go into the office, and for the whole day, they gave me various tasks that were kind of representative of the day-to-day work that was done within the company for this position. So I had to show my skills rather than, again, academic achievements. And that was a good experience also to get to see what the job was actually about, and if it was something that from both my side and their side we were willing to embark on together. And yeah, so that was yeah, a bit different, but definitely very interesting and a nice challenge.
Yeah, interesting. The trial day concept sounds very interesting. So Stefanie, I want to ask you about your transition, and was it challenging when you started the process of searching for jobs? And then also, were there any challenges in terms of adapting to the new environment, both in terms of your skills, but maybe also just like the working style and environment of a private company or now a federal office?
Yeah, the beginning of the transition was not so easy, because I had to find out what I want, so in what field I want to work. And maybe a mistake of myself was that I wanted to work in the field of natural hazards, but I didn't have experience in the field of natural hazards. I mean, I'm a geologist. I know that slopes move. I know that rocks move. So you have a bit of that feeling, but I didn't have a professional experience. And so I applied for natural hazard positions, and but it didn't work out. And I didn't use my geology network. That was maybe the mistake. And then I because I didn't, at the beginning, I didn't want to work in an engineering office, because I didn't want to work in the construction industry. And when you work in geology, you're very soon in the construction industry. Then at one point, okay, I nevertheless applied for a good office that I knew, and well, it made bang, and it worked out. And they were interested in me because I'm a geologist, and because I had the background in climate and water, and they wanted to develop a new business field with these topics. So this is why it worked at the end relatively easily out. But at the beginning, I tried to take another route that did not work out. And then in terms of challenges, well, it was quite okay, but you have to adapt to some things. You work for a client. This means you have a certain amount of hours that you can invest. So you can work less in detail than in research. This is clear. So you have to produce a result quite fast. And you cannot work on a figure for 3 hours and do the details. So you have to, at 80% of the time, you have to stop this is certainly a change, and you have to write down how many hours you worked for which project. I think this is it was for me the most important change in terms of skills and so on. I didn't feel, let's say, overwhelmed. I could slowly learn new skills, so they were quite adapted, or they adapted to work to my path. So this was quite okay, yeah. And what I could profit, I think, from the writing. So at the end, I had to read a lot of reports because I think we have this advantage when you did the PhD that we have this logical thinking. So you see somehow the error in a process of thinking where you think, no, this doesn't work out. And I think this is really a skill we have when we come out of academia, and that we should also celebrate a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, yeah, that's a super valuable skill. I think the sort of time management aspect that you mentioned would definitely be a big change compared to what I'm used to from a research environment. Emily, you had something to add on that point?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just really quickly,
Yeah, sure.
what Stefanie was saying triggered a thought, which was that during the PhD time, the project and all the work that I was doing was for my project, right? And then when you move into this different sector, it's not your own project anymore. And so I really struggled at the beginning with, I mean, I knew this, but realizing it and trying to change your work attitude was a bit of a challenge. And I think I'm still working on that, because yeah, you need to weigh your efforts differently, and also maybe take a bit of distance and not take everything so personally as you might do during your PhD time.
Yeah,
okay, I can understand
that's a good point. You're doing a service for a client, yeah, and not your own research project anymore.
Yeah, that's a difference, huh? Okay, so in the interest of time, we're going to ask one more question to the panel, and then we'd like to open it up to audience questions from the chat. But the last one is simple, which is, what advice would you give to other scientists that are considering making this transition out of academia to a different sector? And we'll start with Grace for this question.
Okay, I'm here. Advice I would give is give it a go. If you're thinking about it, then have a little look. Take a look at structuring CVs and job applications. Do all the networking, and reach out to contacts and networks beyond just the academic. Conferences are really useful to do that. Some conferences are very weighted towards academia, and others very industry and policy, like the River Restoration Conference. I didn't even know existed, and I went last year, and it's all policy and all fisheries trusts and not so much on the research side, and I didn't even know that existed. So if you're considering a career outside of academia, perhaps have a look at a broader range of conferences, workshops, and sort of engagement events that you could participate in. And yeah, my job application was very different from my policy job, but my CV that I wrote for my current job in consultancy was way beyond anything. I didn't realize that designing CVs with like colored backgrounds and fonts and diagrams is a whole thing. And so I got on Illustrator, and I designed a CV. So I'd be happy to email that to anyone that is interested in having a look, because it's completely different to an academic CV. Yeah, that would be my key, like, foot in the door sort of advice.
Thanks for that. Stefanie, any points of advice?
Use your network. Even if it's academic, maybe also an academic person has a good advice on a job. Then be relatively open. Don't narrow kind of the field you're searching in too much down, I think. I think an option is also to, if you have troubles finding something, you might also take a job that is maybe not really what you wanted to find. Because I think the important point is to land this first position outside academia. Once you have landed that, you can more easily apply for other positions outside of academia, because on your CV, you have this one position already outside of academia, and you can take a job and you can learn something there, and you can still change after 2 years. I think this is also an advice I would give. Do not search for 2 years for the perfect job, but rather jump into it, and you can still change. It's not a professorship that you have the rest of your life. I think this is also a difference. And maybe a last thing, my experience also, nevertheless, maybe this is a bit contradicting, but nevertheless, don't say yes to all the tasks they want to give you. Maybe also when you're already inside the job, be a bit selective and tell them what you want to work, because then you're happier and then you are a better collaborator. I think there it is important also to be open and discuss that with your bosses.
Thank you. That is useful advice. And Emily, any points of advice for people looking to make this transition?
Yeah, I would add to think about the different skills that you acquire throughout your academic pathway. So that's more than just doing research and presenting research, and try to maybe have a look at different job ads out there, see what kind of skills they list, and try to think about what is it that you did and what types of skills did you actually put to use for that. So try to, open up your mind and really see what you've been doing, because you've been doing project management for sure. You've been engaging with different types of stakeholders for sure. And there are many, many others on that list. So probably you have collected such a broad skill set that you might not have realized, but if you take some time to think about that, then it'll benefit your CV as well. And don't be shy to say that you have these skills, because you probably do. And then about using the network, I would also suggest that if you find a job, try to look up that company, see if there's anyone that you know who works there, or if not, get in touch with the people you don't even know and just ask if they're willing to have a chat about a certain position. I don't know, but many people will probably be available and willing to do that. And then it'll give you a bit of insights. You can also ask them if they're willing to have you include their name in your application. And I think having this connection with someone who's actually working there can give you lots of insights into the position and what the company is about. So don't be shy and try.
Great, thank you for the advice. So now I wanted to turn it over to Alina to sort of facilitate the question and answer with the audience.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions here in the chat. The first one is, what kind of outputs do you have to show? Is it metrics or reports? Grace?
Sure. Well, I produce mostly reports. Usually my sort of standard workflow is a client will request a report of our findings. So we'll do a geomorphological walkover or a fluvial audit, which was something I didn't even know existed until I got into outside of academia. And we'll conduct a site survey, a desk-based assessment, probably hydrological modelling, flood modelling, and that'll all be compiled into a report that includes maps as well. And then usually it's in some, that's my kind of output. And there's a real awareness needed for like budget time, because, you know, as from academic background, I could spend as much time as I wanted, like spending hours and hours on mapping, as was mentioned before, and really refining the detail and writing reams and reams. But if there's an 8-hour reporting budget, you've got a bullet point, or if you've got 24 hours to do it, then you can go into a bit more detail. So yeah, really being aware of doing things to budget. It's a big one.
Okay. And you, Stefanie, what kind of outputs do you have in your position?
Well, in the private industry part, yeah, it's reports that you write mainly. So you do some field work or analysis in the office, and then what you give to the client are reports. It starts to change a bit in the geology fields, that we try to be more digital, so that you actually also provide interactive maps or a GIS project, that you try to keep the reports very, very short, because nobody really wants to read a report or a long report. So this is, it's actually a good point. So you try to, with your output, you try to be client friendly. It's not like in research where you write a complicated paper with a lot of text, but you should produce something that the client is can easily grasp, and he understands what the conclusion is and what he can do now, or what he has to do now. I think this is also an important point, and this is why we try to move a bit to more the graphic side and reduce the text length.
Oh, that's nice. This make me think about this skill that we need to have in academia also, that is to communicate for a wide range of audiences. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
good to point on the CV.
We can profit from that, yeah. And we are used to make graphics ourselves during a PhD. I think most of us, and I think this is also an advantage. Yeah.
And you, Emily, I think yours must be different from the others.
Yeah, quite different. So if I think back at the previous role, which encompassed a bit more than only the training at the moment, then there I had a proposal. That's one of the very big outputs. So my review of parts of the proposal, but also text that I wrote in the proposal itself. That's a key output. Lots of communication activities. So setting up a website, managing social media channels, creating a poster, a flyer, organizing a workshop, a webinar, all of these different communication types of activities. And with the training, then it's more the actual training material that I develop, the training session that I deliver, be it online or in person, any follow-up or homework exercises. That's all output. And in terms of the project management, then there is also reports towards the funding authority on the progress that we're making within the project, and different deliverables that we need to submit to the European Commission in that sense.
So communication skills again.
Definitely.
So we have another question that I think is very interesting. How have you been able to get to a seniority level of jobs outside of academia? Because on one hand, we have a very qualified to be a PhD, so perhaps should aim to go for senior roles. But on the other hand, we might have zero experience in the sector, having been in academia for so many years. So, Emily, you have thoughts? Or Grace, if you want to talk first, please.
I could take this one, or at least go from my world that I work in. So I didn't know what like the sort of professional ranking of specialists was. So for those who might also not know, it kind of follows your graduates and then your junior roles, and then so it would be like a graduate geomorphologist, a junior geomorphologist, senior geomorphologist, and then what's next? Begins with a P. principal geomorphologist, and then you go further up into your director roles. That might be different for different areas or different lines of work, but that's sort of the seniority rank that kind of goes. And pitching where you need to be, just go as high as you can. Why not? Fake it till you make it. You'll pick it up. We learn fast. We've all got PhDs. We could do it. So I got a senior position straight off, but I know other people that went in at more junior roles. I think I benefited and got that senior role straight off the bat because I went for a 1-year contract. And then I had that to use as leverage for my now permanent senior position. So not everyone's path is the same, but I didn't. I only had geomorphology knowledge, no policy, no regulator experience, and went straight in as a senior. So if I could do it and I make it up as I go along, just try. Why not?
I like your point of view a lot. And Stefanie, what do you think about it?
Grace did really well. I didn't manage to get a senior position in my in the first job after the senior lectureship. I think at least I heard in Switzerland, this is mostly the case for people that come from academia, that they don't get the level they actually have, because the issue is you are kind of a risk for the company. So they don't want you to pay you the high salary because they're not sure if you are actually working well and if you are producing the results that you should produce. This is why they rather go a bit low, and then you have to rediscuss after 1 year if they could not lift you a bit in case when you perform well. I think then you can discuss it. But at the beginning, it's my experiences is quite hard. Because we know a lot, we know really a lot, but you might not know the things that are necessary for the job. So you have to learn.
Yeah, I understand. So that's why it's important to, as I think it was Emily was saying, like contact the people from the company before to apply, to understand how the things work on the company and see how you can manage. And Emily.
Yeah, also in some of the larger companies, you'll find even some advice on their website on how the different levels are structured and what kind of expectations they have for those positions. So I do advise to have a look at that. In the reality where I am now, we don't really have this this clear hierarchy or ranking, but you can definitely see that from the point where I started up to now, I learned a lot by doing, and there was let's say, an internal progression there. And while we still maintain the same title within our position, the responsibilities increase and the type of work that you do changes. I did mention earlier, though, that when I started sending out applications for more hands-on lab work at the time, I was targeting positions where I thought, yeah, sure, I tick most of the boxes, let me try. And I got turned down because I was overqualified. So there, I was struggling because there were senior positions where they required 5+ years experience in the sector. And there I didn't have that experience, but then I was overqualified for the lower entry-level positions. And I didn't quite crack that sector yet. So I wouldn't know what advice to give there. But yeah, as I said, for some other larger consulting companies, for example, it's quite clearly explained what the expectations are for the different.
I think we have time for one more question, if our panelists don't mind. It's a quick question. Catherine said, as a final year PhD candidate in marine biology, I often spend 7 days a week in the lab and realize how stressful it gets. What is the stress level in consulting, for example, or the time you spend in this career? So Grace, how stressful is your job?
It comes and goes. high at times, high to the point that it rivals PhD stress. It's kind of, it was, I mean, this was like early. I came in and it was like end of financial year, and my workload just went skyrocketed. But now I'm in a bit of a lull, and it kind of it ebbs and flows. What I've learned is that it's my responsibility, as well as my line managers and the people that delegate workload. It's my responsibility to manage it too. So I had to learn quick to say, no, I don't have that in the schedule this week. No, I can't push it forward. I can't, I have to really advocate for myself and my peers. And that includes like the time spent on projects, but also the expectation for the outputs. If it's an 8-hour budget, I'm not doing 10 pages of writing. It's not happening. And just being really firm. And that's been hard and scary, actually, but it seems to be working. So that's the thing. It's really taking ownership of the stress. And so hopefully I'll have to update everybody in 6 months' time if I've actually managed to get a handle on it. But yeah, it is stressful at times.
And you, Stephanie?
Yeah, I agree with Grace. It goes up and down. It can be, if you have a lot of deadlines at some point and you have some field work to do, then it can get really stressful. On the other side, I have to say, you have the right to take your weekend, to take off during your weekend. And this in academia, this is sometimes a bit blurred. So, yeah, I think I had more stress during my time as senior lecturer, I say now, when I had to prepare lectures from scratch. That was for me actually the most stressful time. And in private industry, it comes in phases. But because the projects are most of the projects are limited in time, at some point it's done, and then you have a project less. So you have this leveling out. And now in administration, it's the amplitude is a bit smaller of the ups and downs. It's more or less the same level, but it's okay so far.
That's great. And you, Emily, how stressful is for you?
I was similar to who posed the question at the end of my PhD and postdoc. So I was spending many hours in the lab. And at that point, I thought that was the most stressful job one could have in the world. And then I realized, well, there are other very stressful jobs. But like Grace and Stephanie said, it comes in phases. So in my specific case, where we were supporting a proposal, then when we're close to proposal deadline, then that's the most stressful time. And you might have to put in over hours and work really hard, but then it gets quiet again for a little while. And then there's another deadline and the stress builds up again. But I think this is where, like Grace was also saying, it's important to set some boundaries and understand how much it is that you can and should deliver within the time that you're given. And also for me, it was again this trying to realize it's not my PhD project. It's a project that I'm delivering for a client, and I will do the very best that I can, but I need to structure my work a bit differently because I need to manage my time. So yeah, it's a matter of dealing with the stress because it is out there, not just in academia, but learning how to manage it.
Yeah, it's just a different kind of stress. And I have a question for you all. You think that because I'm a PhD candidate also, and I feel that my work never ends. Like when I arrive home, I'm still thinking about my research and the things that I need to do. You think that in the industry is different? Like when you arrive home, your job's done, you don't think about the job? Great.
My work in policy, yes, I would shut my laptop at 4:30 and I'd saunter out the door and that would kind of be it till the next day. In consultancy, I've got much more ownership over my projects, and I'm way more motivated, and I'm way more connected and excited about my projects. So I am finding that I take it home with me a bit more. And I think I had that with the PhD is because it meant so much, and I think I'm experiencing that a bit. I haven't quite worked out what the answer is. I think it's a product of loving my job, I think, but
Mhm.
we'll see.
And you, Stefanie?
I think the advantage is that it is not your own research project or your own project, as Emily said before. So you are less connected to your work than compared to your PhD project. But still, you can be very involved and you can actually take it home, yes. Or also if you have to give presentations or you had maybe a bit of hard discussion with the group. So it's not so easy to digest. And I think here it's important to learn this work-life balance, actually, to leave work at work, and then it's your evening, and I had to learn that as well, and I think this is really important, and actually should also be done during the PhD, I think.
Yeah, work-life balance is my biggest nightmare. And you, Emily?
Yeah, I think it probably depends also on your personality and who you are. I'm not sure there's an answer that fits everyone. But yeah, I did take lots of thoughts home with me. I think I'm getting a bit better at the work-life balance aspect, and it is very, very important. So I think it depends a bit on who you are and how you decide or how you can manage to deal with things. And yeah, if you're very dedicated to what you do and you're really motivated and interested in it, then it's probable that you'll be thinking about it even later. It's something that, you know, fascinates you and it's close to your heart. So that can happen. But yeah, it's also okay to not always think about work.
Well, since we've gone over an hour, I think that we'll wrap things up here. But I really want to thank all of our panelists and thank our audience for asking good questions. It was very illuminating for me to see the diversity of options out there outside of academia. And yeah, thank you for sharing your advice. It was very useful. So yeah, thanks everyone. And everybody stay tuned for more webinars. Sign up for the PAGES ECN newsletter. And thanks for coming. And this will be posted on YouTube at some point as well if you ever want to go back to it and get those gems of advice in the future. So thanks everyone. Have a nice evening and signing off.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Bye.
Bye.